Last night, we in many ways got a preview when Trump's new running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, shared his own message and painted a picture of an economy that has been hurt by trade deals such as NAFTA, which is an early reminder the Trump presidency could have some complications for Canada. Now, Vance added Trump's economic agenda won't cater to Wall Street. All of this is a reminder that in the months ahead, investors will be trying to figure out what a Republican or Democrat-led White House will mean for the markets. Bloomberg's research team, Bloomberg Intelligence, has done an in-depth analysis of just that. Nathan Dean is a senior analyst with BI and helped oversee what looks to me, Nathan, like a huge project. So kudos to you on getting through this. And I'm the simple thinking TV guy, so I'm going to try to boil down the findings for our audience, even though I know on a subject like this, there are all sorts of caveats. But let's start with a Trump presidency. He's leading in the polls, and the markets are assessing what that might mean. What did your team's research find about a possible Trump win?
Yeah, so there's really two things to keep in mind, I think, at the macro level in terms of Trump presidency. And the first is tax reform, because the Trump-era tax cuts for individuals expire at the end of 2025. And President Trump is going to lead Republicans, if they have the House, the Senate, and the presidency, to try and extend those. And, you know, as a result of paying for that, a lot of tax and tariffs associated with the Inflation Reduction Acts, such as the electric vehicle tax credit, could be thrown out as a way of that. So certainly, if you're interested in, or if you're playing in the tech space and you have companies that are exposed to it, something to pay attention to. The other thing is, like you've mentioned before, trade and tariffs. The presidency, whoever wins, President Biden or Trump, you know, they're going to be the ones that are going to be negotiating trade and tariffs. And for example, the Canadian, U.S., Mexico agreement, for example, is coming up for review in 2026. If President Trump wins, he's going to be leading the review of that. Now, when it comes to trade, just remember also that the power of the presidency is a lot more powerful there. So President Trump could implement trade policies without, you know, input from Congress or, you know, so forth. So it's going to be really up to who does President Trump select as his advisors if he wins to ultimately know what the true impact of these trade negotiations could look like.
Now, I think given this widening lead for Trump, the market has sort of gone on this trip towards a Trump presidency. Obviously, in an election campaign, things can change. So let's assume on the other side that a Democrat-led White House actually becomes the reality. So when you did the research on that side, what were some of the overarching themes?
Yeah, so it's a great point, because even though it looks like President Trump would win if the election were held today, look, we're still 3.5 months away. Anything can happen. So to prepare for a Democratic nominee, I'm going to presume it's President Biden, for a Biden 2.0 administration, the thing that you're looking for is actually a continuation of regulatory efforts. So there's a lot of proposals that are at the regulatory level, whether it's the SEC, the EPA, the FERC, lots of agencies out there who have already proposed rules. And if President Biden wins, you're going to see a continuation of implementing these things. So a couple of things you could see is strengthening the Inflation Reduction Act. You could see strengthening of global manufacturers. We have a section in the report talking about what it could mean for John Deere, in particular, of other construction-related equipment, for another infrastructure package. But for a President Biden, ultimately 2.0 administration, you're looking at actually just a continuation of what's happening right now. You're not going to see any broad fiscal, I think, ejections into the economy like you saw through the Inflation Reduction Act or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So it's going to be more subsector and more sector-specific type legislation.
All right, this is really helpful, and for any of our audience members who are Bloomberg subscribers, they can access this very impressive report you've put together. But for those who are not, it sounds to me like whatever happens, beefing up a little bit on regulatory issues and tax issues and how that impacts certain sectors could ultimately pay off for investors.
Yeah, you know, what we like to say is follow the process, because nothing, you know, for all the amount of surprises that you have in Washington, there's actually not that much is surprising, because there's a process for everything. For example, executive orders. If President Trump wins, expect a whole host of executive orders to come out in day one. 85, I would estimate around 85%, 90% of those executive orders, however, are mostly symbolic in nature. It's a fancy way of the president picking up the phone and saying, I'm directing you to do this regulatory change. The other 15%, trade and tariffs like we talked talked about. But whether it's legislation or regulation, there's a process. So follow the process. You know, the other two big hiccups that we have for next year, just to keep in mind, the debt ceiling comes back. Now, the debt ceiling is expected or is scheduled to expire in January 2025. That's good news because it happens during the lame duck session. Most likely Congress will kick the can, but if you get a President Biden 2.0 administration or a Democratic administration in 2.0, you're going to have debt ceiling fights come back. So there's still going to be lots of hiccups, but nothing should surprise you in the short term. It's mostly long-term risk that you can prepare for.
All right, Nathan, thanks very much. Really helpful breakdown. Nathan Jean joining us from Bloomberg Intelligence on the